And before as well to go into the details, I have some quick housekeeping matters. Today we have simultaneous interpretation into Arabic. You can find that on the French channel because as most of you know, Zoom hasn't have the feature of the Arabic channel yet. So if you press the French, you will hear Arabic. As well, I would like to ask you actually to log from your web browser to slido.com. And you will find the details on the chat. My colleague Howie will type it down for you, slido.com, and enter the code ISOC MENA. And then Howie, when he takes the floor, he will explain why this is important for our discussion today. We have been witnessing, as all of you might agree with me, many changes and challenges since the emergence of the COVID-19. I think almost every government, every organization and agency has been quite engaged and overwhelmed with what impact this pandemic is having and how vast it is affecting our lives. The Internet Society, being those technical people who cares about maintaining a sound, safe, secure, and resilient Internet for everyone, cared no less. Today, we are delighted to share with you a report we have conducted for our region so that we can finalize it together and decide on some useful recommendations that could be of benefit for all. I have with me our consultant, Michael Kende, who drafted this report, and I also have with me a group of senior experts and project leaders who will share their reflections from both an international and regional experiences. Our next steps will be to incorporate all your input and publish the report towards the end of July in both English and Arabic. Without further ado, I would like to pass on the mic to my colleague Howard Baggett, whose main job today is to keep us all engaged and interactive. Howard?
Thank you very much, Nermine, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone who is on this call. Welcome to the meeting, the impact of COVID-19 on internet ecosystems in MENA. So my name is Howard Baggett, I'm the Director of Events. And as you would have seen in the chat, I'll just put this in again one more time. We're going to be using a tool called slido.com. Now, Slido, you can open this up on your web browser, or you can actually open it on an application on your phone. It's totally up to you. Once you put in slido.com, it will ask you for a code. And the code for this is ISOC MENA, MENA. Now, why are we using this? We're using this because during the call, we're going to be asking you some questions related to the survey and some general questions as well that we'd like you to answer. So the more people we can get using this tool, the better engagement that we have going through. So it's really easy. So as I say, if you go on slido.com, I'll just share my screen so you can actually see it. Slido.com, and there you go, there's the URL. And as soon as we get enough people in there, we will start off with our first question for you. So let's just go, we'll run the first poll and see where we are. All right, so starting off with a very easy one to get you all used to this. So we've got, please tell us your name. We've got David on the call. There we go. That's better. Excellent. Good. We've got 8 people using it so far. How many people are actually on our Zoom call? We've got 60. So hopefully we'll get a few more. That's it. Excellent. 16 people. They're all coming in. Superb. So you get the general idea behind this. That's good. 17 so far. We're almost at a third. A third of you are being engaged in Slido. This is excellent news. So we need a few more because we're going to be doing some surveys and questions with you a little bit later. So this is just the opening piece, as it were. Fantastic. Nice to see all those names coming in. Julius, Rukia, Max, Nadia, Naveed, Nidal, Munira, Manal. Please excuse my pronunciation. Okay, excellent. So we'll move on to the next one now. And what country are you calling from? So you can all put in what country you're actually going to be calling in from. So I'll just get mine in and send. There we are. And the more people that answer the same, you'll see the word, the country gets bigger, the word gets bigger. These are what you call word clouds. That's it so far. Lots of people from Switzerland. I imagine that's myself and Max. From Egypt, Lebanon. Egypt's doing well. Pakistan, Lebanon. Excellent. As you can see, we're completely and utterly global on this call. We've got representation from all over the place. This is absolutely fantastic. Superb. And 25. We're almost halfway there with the amount of people who have got actually joining us on the questions. So we'll move on to the next one. There we go. How would you describe your day in one word? There we go. Superb. Yeah, lots of busy, lots of great, lots of good. This is positive for a Monday, especially for the Monday. 15. As soon as we get around 25, we can move on to the next one. We'll just give it a wee bit more. Excellent, superb. Right, and the next one, slightly different. So how are you affiliated to the Internet Society? That's interesting. Lots of members, chapters and SIGs. Interested in the internet. That's good. We should have actually asked, how do we convert the interest in the internet to become our members and parts of our chapters and SIGs? We'll do that for the next one, I think. Okay, excellent. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for taking part in that. That's a really good start. I'm just going to stop sharing now, and now to move on to the next part. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Michael Kende from the Graduate Institute, and he's going to be presenting a presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on the internet ecosystems in MENA. And if you just give me a moment, I will load up his slides. Over to you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much, Howie, and thanks everyone at Internet Society for this opportunity to present a little bit on the COVID crisis and the impact on the internet in MENA and what can be done. First of all, given the topic, I hope this finds everybody healthy and safe, able to work, and well, healthy. I think that's the key. If you could just go to the next slide. So I think this is one of the key questions. If you think back 15, 20 years ago, what would we have done without the internet in a crisis like this in terms of work, entertainment, communications, being able to do something like this without being able to travel or move around much? And I think that one of the points of this call is that not everyone enjoys the same level of access, the same speeds. Not everyone has access to start with. So this presentation, this work is really to try and find solutions, suggestions to improving the internet, making it more resilient for not just the crisis, but after the crisis and moving forward. Next slide, please. So of course, the COVID pandemic has been a global shock for all of us. We've had to stay home under lockdown or confinement with varying degrees of having to stay in, but even when we go out, we have to, in many countries, socially distance. In most countries, I think it's safe to say businesses, schools, governments have had to physically close. And this has made, for those of us who have access to it, the internet more important than ever. So we can work from home, our children or students can study, government services can be provided, including educational services, telemedicine, and others. And also that we're able to communicate with each other, friends and family that can't see each other, some getting caught between countries, that we can get a little entertainment and take our minds off of what's happening around us for some spells of time. The internet was definitely tested through this, but largely validated. It proved resilient. We're going to ask a few questions to make sure this is true for all of you after this presentation, but by and large, the internet held up well. The increased usage was accommodated, new innovations were released, but of course, the crisis magnified the digital divide because all of the things described here couldn't be done if you didn't have access to the internet. So we'll definitely talk about that as well and addressing those issues. So the report discusses challenges and solutions and highlights gaps that need to be filled in the long run. And it really builds on a report that we worked on and that was released in May that talks about all of the different pieces and the steps that we'll talk about here in greater detail. And I'm just going to send the link to it in the chat so that you can look at that after the call and take that in reference to what we're talking about here. Next slide, please. So, of course, internet usage has changed significantly for all the reasons we've described. It's not just that total traffic is up, but the line between peak times and off-peak times has blurred quite a bit. And as many of us have seen, there's less difference between weekends and weekdays in terms of usage and being online and taking advantage of the internet. The NTRA compiled some good numbers on this, comparing a week in April to a week in March in Egypt, looking at broadband consumption up 87%, mobile up 18%. The peak internet usage hours doubled to 15 hours a day from noon to 3 a.m. So people were up and doing something on the internet for much longer than usual. Web browsing increased, gaming, Netflix, educational site usage increased 376%. I suppose that not much was being done online the month before, and everyone turned to it from there. Next slide, please. So I want to break down a little bit the different pieces of the internet and the way that it's being used through the crisis and beyond. What are some of the challenges and solutions? This maps very well with the previous paper that I sent the link for, looking at international and national infrastructure for bringing traffic in from overseas and across borders with hopefully mostly fiber cable. Last mile access, which can be both fixed, fiber, copper, cable, or mobile access, 3G, 4G, and in some countries in the region starting to turn to 5G. And for content and services, the data centers are important to be able to serve content locally. And finally, and certainly last but not least, internet exchange points within the country are used by ISPs to exchange traffic with one another and to access content locally rather than using valuable and somewhat scarcer international capacity to get content or to exchange traffic. But all of this takes time and money. Certainly in the short run, in a period when people are locked down, it's very difficult, as we'll see, to make much change in the infrastructure. It's more how it's used that really changed. And what it was used for, as we see in terms of communications on the right-hand side for voice over IP and video conferences like this, the usage of Zoom and the other video applications went up enormously. E-government services, particularly for the period of the crisis, education and healthcare. Healthcare partly for people with symptoms to try and get health care before having to leave their house, and also for those with other symptoms to be able to get telemedicine without clogging up the hospitals. And finally, moves towards the digital economy. Digital payments are very important for social distancing. It's easier to pay if you don't have to go into contact if you're in a store. And it also makes it easier to shop online from home. And another important thing was keeping small businesses and other businesses running so that the economy kept moving and that small businesses were able to keep operating. Okay, next slide, please. And so the actions really depended on the time frame and the type of user. And we'll go through a few. So in terms of the time frame, during the short run, during the crisis, when everything was locked down, and hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it might, during that crisis, it's very difficult to build any of this infrastructure that we've talked about. People have to be out, things need to be imported, it takes time, it takes money. After the crisis, there's a period where I think a lot of regulatory changes can be made before necessarily new fibers could be laid or networks be put in place. And finally, in the long run, infrastructure can be built, new services can be created, and the point is that the planning for that should start as soon as possible, because some of these pieces of infrastructure take a significant amount of time. Then we can also think about different kinds of users. You can think about an advanced user, a lucky one whose usage is affordable and meaningful. They're still able to continue, they can work, they can get all of these new services. Some marginal users may be online but can't afford all the additional access that they need to be able to accommodate the increased demand from their household. So affordability is going to be very important for them. And then there's non-users for reasons of not having availability where they live, not really being able to go out to an internet cafe during a lockdown. There's affordability. There's a lack of perceived need that's clearly been impacted by the need to get online during the crisis. And for many, just a lack of skills and lack of understanding, a lack of comfort with going online. So that all of these issues need to be addressed over the different time frames. Next slide, please. So if your country doesn't have an IXP or a data center where content can be served locally, most of the content comes from abroad. Content and services are coming from abroad, whether that's Zoom, whether that's movies, YouTube, anything like that. So it goes through a backbone, it comes into the country to an ISP, and then it's sent to the end user over what's sometimes called the last mile, whether that's your mobile or broadband. Next. Oops, can you go back? There should be some steps along the way. Next. Okay, there's a few pieces missing. I don't know, go back to the previous one, please. Well, there's some pieces missing. So from the backbone, the international part, the issues are capacity and cost. Bringing it in from abroad is very expensive, and there may be a limited capacity so that there's a lot of congestion. So what should have been on the domestic side is a data center and an IXP. And if you have a data center within your country and an IXP where it can be exchanged, then the traffic can be served locally directly to the ISP. And that saves quite a bit of the international capacity and the cost. But still, over the last mile during the crisis, there was a lot of extra usage. So there were issues with capacity. There were issues with the cost for many users. And there was the issue of availability if people simply couldn't go online. And that kind of corresponds to the three different types of users. Everyone was worried about capacity, a lot of people worried about price, and some were worried about availability. Next slide, please. Oh, now it works. Keep going. Okay. The short run, infrastructure is fixed, as we said, and actions that could be taken under the crisis were mainly to do with capacity and cost. So in terms of reducing the load on the last mile and the international capacity, many of the streaming companies that were providing the video that took up a lot of the capacity, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, and others, reduced the definition or the quality to use less capacity, up to 25% less capacity. And in some countries, consumers were being asked to try and turn down their definition, turn down their capacity, try and load things overnight to take a little load off. So that's really in the short run when everyone was really using the internet quite extensively during all those peak hours. Then moving down, the international capacity is still expensive. It may be needed less, so universal service funds could be used to subsidize the cost. Many countries increased the amount of spectrum available to the mobile operators to reduce the congestion and allow for the increased usage. I've listed the countries that we found here, please in the chat or elsewhere with an email, let us know if any of these examples, if you can add to any of the examples with others that would be useful to put into the final report. I think one thing interesting in Kuwait, that there was kind of a trade that the mobile operators got more capacity, but in return they were asked to give a free amount of data to every user per day and free phone calls in exchange for the increased spectrum capacity. Data centers, moving to the right, data centers and IXPs generally proved resilient. There have been charts of the increased usage of the IXPs, and they've all seemed to be able to accommodate it. But of course, reliable power is always an issue, and may have been more of an issue, particularly for the data centers during the crisis. Next slide, please. In addition, for end users and the content and services in the digital economy, some actions were taken. For end users, taxes could have been lowered on devices or access to lower the cost. In at least 3 countries, restrictions were removed in the short run on the use of voice over IP services, so that things like this could be done. Skype and the other services could be used. Many countries increased the data caps to enable increased usage. I know in Egypt, the government paid the operators to increase the data caps by 20%. The other countries, I think, was more of a request that the operators granted. And in a number of countries, access to educational and healthcare websites were not counted against the data cap to lower the cost. Sometimes this is referred to as zero rating. That has other connotations, but in this case, it was clearly a positive to be able to allow students and patients to be able to get access to critical conditions. In some countries also, healthcare workers were granted free data capacity so that they could continue to work and gather information. In terms of the digital economy, there were actions taken to promote the usage of digital payments. And because of the stress on SMEs, that small businesses that had to close in a few countries, the operators were not allowed to cut off small businesses for lack of payment, and they had to take all new businesses on so that the businesses could continue to provide service over the internet in an affordable way. Next slide, please. In the medium run, which in many countries is now, steps could be taken to lower the cost of international and national capacity, implementing a wholesale operator to aggregate demand and lower the cost of a certain volume could be done without building anything. Universal licenses could be made available, as is the case in some countries, so that there's no longer a monopoly at the international gateway, and any ISP could access and buy international content to lower the cost. In the last mile, ways could be found to grant the mobile operators with permanent access to the spectrum that was given to them for the short-run crisis. Many expect that the new normal is going to involve more usage and that the operators will need the spectrum. Could work with the fixed operators to upgrade broadband. XDSL could be upgraded to provide faster speeds. In the data center, actions could be taken to attract more content, both international and local, with a few steps ensuring cybersecurity was clearly an issue during the crisis, privacy and data protections on the new content being hosted, and removing intermediary liability so the data center or any company hosting in the data center wasn't liable for what was put there by a user. And finally, the IXPs could open up to more members to facilitate more local traffic exchange. For instance, in Egypt, today only the ISPs are connected, and the content delivery networks, Google and the others, could be allowed to directly connect and exchange their traffic through the IXP. Next slide, please. In the medium run, in terms of the end users and the usage, digital skills is critical for end users, particularly those that were offline or marginally online, to get more skills training, to be able to meaningfully use the internet. Consider whether voice over IP could be made available in some countries permanently, again, to facilitate the long run usage of these new tools without restrictions. Again, pass regulations to attract more content and service providers, similar to the ones that we talked about for the data centers. And then the key is to really start to promote the digital economy that's going to facilitate businesses to stay in business through the crisis, and was something that needed to be done anyway. If you look at the previous paper that I talked about, a lot of this is building a foundation for a digital economy to bring all businesses, all of government services online, to be able to serve local customers and to start create regional or global customer or client bases. And that can be done. One critical piece is digital payments and facilitating e-commerce with better consumer protection and taxes. Next slide, please. Finally, in the long run, this is when new infrastructure can be built, when the digital divide can be fully removed or crossed. Actions can be taken to facilitate the building of more infrastructure. That can include making rights-of-way access easier, so that it's easier and less costly to get permits to build, to be able to share infrastructure, whether that's ducts, towers, other pieces of infrastructure, landing stations, and increase the number of licenses, potentially even unlimited, so that anyone in business can start to offer new services without having to get a license or being restricted. In the last mile, a national broadband plan is important, providing a plan for deploying fixed and mobile broadband. In many countries it exists and needs to be implemented, and hopefully with a little greater urgency after seeing what's been happening in the past few months and the possibilities going forward. Can also facilitate or encourage public Wi-Fi hotspots for people when they're able to go out, and community networks are a new way to bring smaller rural communities online, and the Internet Society has been doing quite a bit of work in this area, and I would refer you to the relevant pages on the website, the Internet Society website, to start to get a sense for the community network work that can be done. Data centers need to be attracted if they're none, or upgraded. One key issue is power, but also the regulations, the land access, the ability to access fiber and other pieces are important. That's to be able to serve content locally so that it doesn't go through the kind of the longer route of coming from international sources. And develop an IXP if there is none, or increase the size of the IXP, or move to new cities with new IXPs within a country. Again, the Internet Society has a lot of resources on this, and I would refer you to those pages on the Internet Society website. And finally, in the long run, with respect to, next slide, please. End users, actions have to be taken to make sure that all usage becomes meaningful. That includes increasing digital skills for end users so that all end users can go online and feel comfortable, removing any other barriers in terms of cost, availability of relevant content in Arabic. Content and services, it's important that users aren't just consumers, but also able to develop new content and services. In many cases, new content and services were being developed during the crisis, but there's others that could be developed to serve the digital economy and hopefully create some job opportunities for those creating them. Full platform of e-government services so that no one is caught by surprise the next time hopefully not, but if all of the services have to be online, and it's also just an efficient way for a government to provide service to all of the citizens. And finally, the digital economy, develop an ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship to be able to develop these new content and services, and really work hard across all of the economy to bring the entire economy online. And that's not just specific to this crisis or whatever the new normal looks like, but it's also essential for all countries to develop their digital economies to be able to enter the global economy. And next and final slide, please. So the crisis has really highlighted the need to close the digital divide and develop a digital economy to be able to buy and sell things online within the country or internationally. And after the crisis passed, there's likely to be a new normal. We may already be in it, where people have gotten used to these online tools and they're more comfortable having webinars instead of flying everywhere or driving everywhere for a meeting or conference. So there's likely to be increased usage even after the crisis has passed. So in the short run, infrastructure has to be supplemented, made affordable, content and services adapted to serve the needs of citizens and businesses for the crisis. In the medium run, new policies and regulations can be passed to lower the cost and increase the capacity of the infrastructure and make it quicker and easier to access. And finally, in the long run, when things can be built, internet access has to be made universally available so everyone has the same opportunities. Existing networks should be upgraded to 4G, start looking towards 5G, and enhance the digital economy for all businesses in the country. So it's quite a tall order. There's a lot there. I'm looking forward to the comments. Also send in comments afterwards so that we can incorporate them into the final report, as Nermine said. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was an excellent presentation. Just give me a moment. As I posted in the chat, we can have some questions and answers now. So if you'd like to revisit Slido, which you were in just a little bit before, I will just share my screen so you can see this once again. Here we go. So if you go to Slido again, and you have an opportunity to go to the Q&A. So if you can actually, if you want to post any questions, then they will pop up on the screen. And we're just looking.
Also, please feel free to type in. I saw someone say that they only had their data cap increased for 1 month, which it sounded like it would be done throughout the crisis. So any kind of observations, input would be very interesting as well. Thanks.
We still have no questions.
But there are some comments coming up from the chat, Howie. So Yusuf, do you want to share with us your experience from Kuwait, please? I was asking Yusuf if you'd like to share your experience from Kuwait. What kind of measures have you taken, or what's the situation there?
Okay, so the IXP, which is relatively new and was already doing quite well, as you'll see from the previous report that I referenced, is holding up and probably being very helpful in terms of allowing for the increased usage and keeping down latency during the crisis and beyond. So that's good to hear.
And Khaled, if you have a question, please go ahead and ask. This is the part where you can ask any questions or share any comments that you might have, please.
I have a question actually now in the Q&A. It says, in Sudan, TPRA provided more spectrum for mobile operators to cover the demand during pandemic as a short-run strategy.
Okay, great. I'm not sure if I had that example, so we'll definitely add it. And thanks for that. In all of these countries, one question is, why do it just in the short run? Everyone's usage is going up anyway. If the operators needed more spectrum, what's the argument for not providing it for the longer run to be able to address the increases in demand, provide some more flexibility for the operators?
Thank you, Michael. Another one from Anonymous. Internet international connectivity prices is very high. Did big vendors contribute during COVID-19 in any means?
To my knowledge, no. That's an excellent point and one that should be raised. No, the ones with the content were trying to lower their definition or the quality a little bit so that they were saving on capacity. So the streaming providers, Netflix and the others. But to my knowledge, there was no reduction in internet connectivity prices. And that was kind of what was driving behind this notion of getting all of the ISPs to pool together, maybe create a wholesale operator to buy large quantities of capacity and be able to resell it at the lower price because of the volume discounts.
All right, moving on to the next question. We've got a few here now. When do you expect Web 3.0 to become a reality?
Boy, I'll throw that one open to anybody. That's an interesting question.
No answer for that. We'll come back to you on that one then.
Where are you seeing these?
These are in Slido in the Q&A part.
Oh.
So the next one is we've done this one. Regarding data caps being increased in Egypt, my ISP only increased my data cap by 20% for 1 month. IIRC, it was for the month of April.
That sounds right. I mean, it was hard to tell from the announcements how long that would last. I mean, it was definitely the case that the government had decided to subsidize an increase of 20%, but it wasn't clear that it would only be for April. And I imagine that would have been very welcome in May and possibly even June as well.
All right, we've got 2 more questions here. What about the IXP's connectivity traffic in the region during this lockdown period?
Sorry, what was that one again?
It's what about the IXP's connectivity traffic in the region during this lockdown period? I suppose was it higher? Was it lower? Obviously, it's going to be higher, a lot higher.
I think that one of the following speakers may be able to address that directly. David, I see, will be able to address that. To my knowledge, from other countries I've looked at, it's gone up, but that the IXPs were able to address it. But David Belson can talk about it in his presentation.
Okay, and one more question. Do most of the countries in MENA allow 2.5 to 5 and 6 gigahertz to be used in an unlicensed way for Wi-Fi use? Some countries do, and this has helped.
Oh, very interesting. I hadn't come across that. That I can see how that would help, although some of the benefit of Wi-Fi is when you're able to leave your apartment or residence, but that would certainly help. So I'll get that one down and we'll address it for the final paper.
All right, superb. We're now just going to go on to, we have a video which has been sent to us.
Howie,
sorry.
if I may, we have a couple of questions in the chat, if you may take them as well.
Sure, absolutely. Let's try and find them in the chat.
And how
Here we
it's
are.
Jane. I may have been unclear. Michael, the question on 2.55 and 6 was from me.
Oh.
That's what I put in the chat.
Okay, well, it's a good question, and we should definitely answer that for the final report. It didn't come up in any of the observations, but clearly it's also a long-run solution to availability. Thanks.
I've got another question here. Don't you still think that the data prices are still high in the Gulf countries? That's from Nashad Shirayil.
Yes, I imagine they are. I mean,
Okay.
clearly a lot of the things that we're talking about to address the short-run costs should be addressed in the long run as well, to bring down the costs and make it more affordable, make sure everyone can go online. And we really tried to differentiate, not just to go online and be able to do the bare minimum, which may have sufficed before this, but to be able to go online and watch a movie, do video conferencing, and conduct work, have your whole household be able to do access education and other services, and that needs to be affordable. So I think that the parameter of what's affordable needs to shift to a much higher data usage.
All right, I think we're pretty much on time there. So we're now going to move to a video message that came in from Walid Al-Sakaf, who is one of our Board of Trustee members. So I'm just going to share you his video. And here we go.
Hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to contribute with this brief message from the north, Sweden, where I'm based right now. As I can imagine, this event is crucially important as we tackle this global pandemic. COVID-19 has impacted our lives in many different ways. And in the Middle East in particular, I can imagine it impacting a lot in the areas of education, for example, where children have been unable to go to school. Unfortunately, it's not the same infrastructure that we find in many developed countries, including where I am based in Sweden. Even in countries like Sweden, we still suffered. Imagine the situation in the Middle East and elsewhere. So I've been in touch with several folks. As you know, I am from Yemen, but I've been aware of the situation there has been really drastic and unfortunate in many ways. So what is it that one can do to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on our lives using the internet? And leveraging distant learning is one way I've been investing in quite a lot. I've been giving trainings to Yemeni individuals, both trainers, so that we can expand the knowledge of how to use the internet to reduce the impact of this pandemic. For example, the one area that we could all work on is improving the knowledge base of the tools that are available at our disposal. How to use Zoom, for example, how to use various web tools that allow you to record your lectures, how to communicate more effectively, how to deliver messages in a digital form. It's a mindset shift with many. I imagine the digital natives, those of Generation Z and the millennials, these would have it easier, but those who are older, people like me, for example, would have more difficulty in embracing this change. Nonetheless, I'm really delighted that there is a shift in the perspective of many in the educational system in many countries in the Middle East. And I'd like to use this opportunity to reflect on this and see that maybe what is after COVID-19 is never the same as it before. So this critical moment requires us to have new mechanisms, new strategies to embrace digital technologies and leverage them more effectively for education. So with that, I mean, my personal view on this is that the internet will play a much more important role in the educational sector, and much of the material will go online. And with that, we need more resources, more know-how, knowledge, skill development, and most importantly, a dedication by you, the people who are in charge of setting the scene for the internet to grow in the region. So with that, that's my message. I wish you a successful event, and I hope we meet again soon after this is over.
Some great words there from Walid Al-Sakaf. All right. Now, moving on, what we're going to do now is we're just going to revisit Slido again. So just give me a moment. We've got a couple of questions relating to the presentation that you were given earlier on. So if you can all go back to your Slido, live polls, here we are.
And Howie, if I may, because Sharif Al-Qassas has a question, I think, for Michael, until you bring up the Slido on your screen. Michael, can you attend to this question on the chat?
Should we also be considering payback for user-generated capital, also known as data? That's a huge question, and it's a good question. I think that the parameters are changing, and it would certainly change the model. So it's, I mean, it would clearly be a long-run issue, and it would clearly not be just in MENA, but there have been investigations or reports written in Australia, the UK, the EU on how to address the digital economy. And there are some new models that are coming out for how data can be shared, pooled, deliver more public good. And if you'd like to see some examples, please email me or in the chat or offline, and I'd be happy to share some of those. But that's really a long run, much more global issue.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And just for anyone, if you are sending in messages to the chat, then I don't necessarily see them, so I don't need to ignore you. It's just I've got a lot of screens open on my laptop here. So if you're all looking on the Slido now, you see the first of the, or you see the Slido, the address, and you see the code, which is going to go on to the very first question. So, did your household use the internet significantly more than before? 50% or more, in other words. Yes, there we are. Pretty definitive. I think that's fair for everyone. So far, we've got one person who's answered the question. Still only one person? Anyone answering?
So we click the answer that we want, Howie, and we press enter, or
absolutely. Just click on the answer. There we go. We've got 2 people. So before we're getting just under 30 participants in this. So we'll just give it a little bit longer. See if we can get up into double figures. All right. Yeah, I think that's pretty conclusive that everyone was using the internet a lot more. So moving on to the next question. Was your internet noticeably slower than before? There we are. There we go. So a lot of people said it wasn't. All right, people are getting faster at this. This is good. We're up to 8, almost in double figures. See if we can get there for the next one. There we go. We made it into 10. Superb. Thank you, everyone. On to the next question. Did you have an increased number of internet outages? I can definitely say I had a few in my house. It's probably more to do with the children than anything else. 10. Okay, let's go for the next question. Did you experience any cybersecurity attacks during the crisis? No, well, that's a good thing. Next question. Did your internet provider offer any special packages during the crisis with larger data packages or lower prices? Perfect. Okay, on to the next question. Did your internet provider exempt any services such as health services from charges under the data package? This is really good, this information, because it helps us build a picture of what happened throughout the region. Excellent. 18. Next up, 20. We want 20 participants for the next one. Did your government encourage or subsidise internet providers to make these special offers? Half of them did. Some people didn't know. One more. Can we get one more person to answer? Move to the next one. Let's move on. Do you know if the government provided additional spectrum to operators? Okay, moving on to the next question. Oh, we got to 20. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Next question. Did the government prepare a new platform related to the crisis, healthcare, distance learning, etc.? An interesting thing we had here was a number of my daughter's friends were actually doing extra teaching courses for younger children at the school. So setting up their own little businesses, very creative. Government. 21, fantastic. Next question. Did you personally ever communicate with anyone who was using the internet for the first time? I can't say I have. 23% said yes. Wow. Well, that's a great positive. Next question. Did you personally ever communicate with anyone who's using a service such as Zoom for the first time? Okay. A few more, 23. That's our biggest response yet. Thank you. Next question. Do you think that our way of doing business will go back to normal post-crisis, or will there be a new normal relying more on the internet? And we're at 24 participants. Superb. So it looks like it's going to be a new normal, which I would agree with. And would you like the way of doing business to go back to normal, or would you prefer the new normal? All right, so it looks like it's going to be the new normal for most people. Excellent, thank you, Rick. We're just going to stop the survey there for the moment, but do keep Slido open. We're going to be coming back to this a little bit later. So next up, I would like to introduce Jane Coffin, who is our Senior Vice President, who's going to be presenting Internet Growth and Internet Strong projects. So Jane, I'll just share your slides and then please take it away.
Thank you, Howie. And thank you, everyone. Shukran for being here today. Some of you know me and others don't. My name is Jane Coffin. I've worked for over 20 years in both government, companies, development projects in other countries where I lived for many years, and also here with the Internet Society since 2012. The focus of my work over the 20-something years, 25 now maybe, that I've been working has been on infrastructure development, working with communities to build that infrastructure, a champion for different logical policies and regulations that help govern the infrastructure, but also help open up opportunities. As many of you know, from the introduction that Michael just gave you to the report, there's so much going on where we've seen the importance of infrastructure and access to it, because the infrastructure has become a lifeline along with the internet and what the internet brings. The technology has proven, and the different parts of it, from the internet exchange points to the data centers to the carriers, to the other content delivery networks. They've been resilient, and you'll hear more from another colleague in a bit about that. We have been amazed to watch how some governments around the world are moving so quickly. We saw from a colleague here on this call that Sudan has moved to change the rules. We've seen here in the United States 6 gigahertz opening up for Wi-Fi use. This happened almost within weeks or a month of COVID. So the political will changed with the crisis. And I think it's something that for many of you that may have been involved also in the International Telecommunication Union, I've been involved in the ITU since 1998 as a rapporteur in many groups, but also both government, industry, different sides of the house, and now as Internet Society, championing the different importance of connectivity and how we can help with that. So the Internet Society took a step back last year, and we have reorganized, and we're taking a look at projects that we hope, and we are executing on those projects with many of you, on ways that we can help build more of the infrastructure. That's the Internet Growth Portfolio, and then make it stronger, the security side of the house. And in all of this are all of you, our org members, communities of interest, the people that help build the infrastructure or who are creating network operator groups or working in the IGF to talk about a better common understanding on things. It's a big ecosystem and we're all in it together. And so my colleague Joe Hall, he's the Senior Vice President for Internet Strong, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Internet Growth. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. So next slide. Obviously now with COVID, this is even more important, this observation about the growth of the internet, but the uneven growth. And we've seen that, as many would say, the digital gap or the digital divide is even more obvious right now. I think it was Doreen Bogdan from the ITU on a recent call said that almost 1 billion children are out of school. That was a UNICEF statistic. And I'm not, I don't have children, but I have friends who do. And I know Howie, who's on this call as well, and Michael, who I'm looking at in the window here. People have had to change their lives on how to educate their kids. I think Nermine had told me that the Minister of Education in Egypt was so excited that everyone had to go online because he's been a strong advocate for online learning. It's really amazing to see how quickly we all had to shift, which meant psychologically it was something that was hard, but also we're having to take a look at some of our policies and regulations, the way we work. Our teams had to reimagine all our projects almost within 2 or 3 weeks of our organization making a quick decision in early April that we would not be traveling for the rest of the year for the safety of our teams and the safety of our community. We pivoted quickly, as they say, and moved. And it was not the easiest decision. It was hard for some of the teams just because we love going out into the community. We love seeing all of you. We like being in the same place. We can have a tea or a coffee and understand things together. And so now we're understanding them together online, which for some people is a little awkward. I have found that some people love Zoom, others not so much, or they're using Teams, Microsoft Teams. I think I've been on 6 different video platforms, right? I'm grateful for the internet because I can also chat with my mother more now and my friends, and we have social time, which is a little weird, but it's what it is. So this infrastructure, this important lifeline of ours, and building this out and building the talent and the capacity, those of you who might want to build an IXP, but you're not sure, or build a community network where Max and Juan can help you on that, or the internet exchange points with Naveed and Machuki. Naveed's on this call. And David and Matt, who are part of the Internet Growth Projects for measuring the internet and taking a look at the information that people need to make good decisions, for case studies that also show you how to collect more data and why it's important. So all of this is coming together in Internet Grow. Next slide. So as the internet is an ecosystem, so are our projects. There are 8 projects. The important thing to remember is that they're part of building things and making them better and stronger. The projects that I manage with the team are the community networks, infrastructure, and community development, which is IXPs, network operator groups, and the research and education networks, and how to build those out, and the communities to build them, to sustain them. Measuring the internet, part of the 3 projects that I manage. This is a really great project that others will talk about later, about bringing in data making sure we have information for evidence-based policymaking. Manners, encryption, open standards, internet way of working, and time security are part of the strong portfolios, which I'll describe briefly too. Next slide. So here's the building the internet or the internet growth portfolio. Next slide in more detail for you. Under growth, I mentioned community networks, infrastructure, and measuring the internet. Next slide. On community networks, you'll hear more about this later. It's connecting the unconnected, finding the local champions who will help build connectivity from the community out. For those of you that are regulators or policymakers, people often refer to this as the last mile. Note that we've heard from the GSMA and others that for communities of 5,000 and under, there's no return on investment for some of the mobile operators to connect those communities. That's a very interesting data point. Oh, sure, I'll slow down. Sorry for the interpreters. With respect to the fact that if a return on investment is not made for some operators in communities of 5,000 and under, then who's going to be building out to those communities? We often find that these smaller community networks built from inside the community out with authorization, obviously where it's needed in some governments. Some governments don't need an authorization for communities to build out, others may require it. Whatever works in your region, this is part of the important part of what we do on this. And again, I mentioned the local champions. Next slide. The pillars of the community networks, and for the interpreters, I'm just going to read the top: policy, backhaul, knowledge, users, sustainability. This is part of the ecosystem with community networks. I won't go into huge detail, but the key thing is it's connecting people who are unconnected for opportunity and socioeconomic growth. Next slide. Strong infrastructure and local communities, they're providing those building blocks. So I meant when I talked about community networks, it's that infrastructure, both technical and human, coming together. Same with internet exchange points. This is building a better internet for all of us. And we have to work on those local technical communities to advance some of our technical goals for our projects and for all of you. Next slide. The how on the infracom side, which is the infrastructure and community networks. That's our name for it, but think internet exchange points, local infrastructure, as Michael mentioned earlier, for local traffic exchange. There's capacity building, community building, infrastructure development, partnerships, and global engagement. And I should have said, in all of this, there are great partnerships that are important to how we do what we do. Next slide. Measuring the internet. We're bridging that gap between academic networking, research, and non-scientific audiences, and Matt and David can explain more on this. Journalists, public policymakers, and researchers are part of that grouping for how we can tell a better story with data. There are standalone resources that exist, but they're often focused on a specific aspect of internet infrastructure driven by commercial interests. We want to be that trusted source of information with respect to the internet, so that we can make the good, relevant data and interpretations easier to find, share, and reuse slower. Okay. Measuring the internet, use case driven. I'm going to read from the slides to help with the interpretation. Internet shutdowns, enabling technologies, internet way of networking, internet resilience. So we're doing a case study specifically about resilience in Africa. We're looking at one of our projects about what the key core things are about the internet and how to describe that. When we work with our partners, we're going to be looking at working very closely with an organization called Kende, an RIR, which is a regional internet registry, for example, RIPE NCC, who does great work, not only in the region, but globally with all the resources that they develop for collecting data. Oracle, which is a company that has some great data sets, not only with respect to IXPs, but with respect to shutdowns. We are working in the community with colleagues from organizations like Access Now, where they hold a RightsCon that'll be online. We're working closely with the Internet Research Task Force, which is a part of the Internet Engineering Task Force, looking at ways that you can do more research on aspects of the internet. Working with the ACM Internet Measurement Conference. We're looking at where we can participate online in other events as appropriate. And we are hoping with the work that we're doing, as we set up an observatory, to help consume and process third-party data. We're going to use existing measurements. We're not going to replicate the work others are doing. Next slide. On the strong side, the stronger internet. This is managed by Senior Vice President Joe Hall. Next slide. There are 5 projects from the Internet Society side. They're all systemically attached and interface with each other, as well as some of the GROW projects. So promoting the internet way of networking, and I'm reading from the slide for the interpreters, a response to the forces shaping the internet today. The outcomes of our work in 2020 will be to create a clearer understanding of the core technical properties of the internet. We want to be able to explain those properties to everyone, not just technical people, not just regulators and policymakers, but explaining this well so that people understand why the core technical properties of the internet are important and why those need to be stable. We're going to be providing, generate support for the internet way of networking, which is identifying those core principles, encouraging others to adopt those core principles, and to create the flexibility for other application and innovation that on top of the other infrastructure pieces here. We're going to test our approach in the context of specific legislation. What does that mean? It means that in some countries where we see things that are coming in that might threaten that key balance of those key internet principles, we may comment publicly. We may work with those governments. For example, Brazil just put out a specific piece of legislation, which is very complicated, and it's questioning the core aspects and the stability of infrastructure with this new piece of legislation. Next slide. Extending encryption. Many of you, of course, have heard about encryption. Joe Hall may have given presentations on this before to you. We have a core project team working on this. Basically, we're addressing the threat to encrypted communications posed to both governments and the private sector with this project. The outcomes of our work in 2020, we hope to be to develop a narrative that advances end-to-end encryption against threats such as exceptional access. We hope to create a diverse and engaged global network of coalitions with aligned participants. I should say the encryption team to date has a great variety of resources, great project briefs, great briefs on encryption and how different users can help encrypt themselves at home, not themselves, but their infrastructure at home, and how this also works for companies. So please take advantage of those resources that we have and see how this can work for you. And Nermine can get you some of those resources. Next slide. The third project of the 5 in the Strong Internet group is securing global routing. Many of you probably participate in this, but this is where we're growing the mutually agreed norms for routing security, MANRS, manners. So again, mutually agreed norms for routing security. We're growing the manners community. We're improving measurement of routing security, building capacity among network engineers, and driving global manners adoption. The outcomes of our work in 2020 under this project, we hope to be to double our manners membership to include new kinds of organizations such as content delivery networks, CDNs, and for the Manners Observatory to be a production service. And that's something the team is working on. Next slide. Increasing time security. This is something that a lot of people are very interested in and didn't realize how important this was to their infrastructure. We're trying to look for standard building blocks for the internet's operation related to time security. Some of the standards related to time security, one of our team members is working on this in the IETF. The outcome of our work in 2020 is to develop materials to help others in their deployments, to make this understandable, what time security is, to everyone. From the technical, where most people know about it, but may not have implemented it. For example, putting a time server into an IXP to keep networks on the same time. Also for policymakers and regulators, why this is important to see what your community is doing there. we're looking to establish metrics to track the future deployment of time protocols as well. Next slide. So I think this is the last project in the suite of 5 projects in the Internet Strong portfolio, leading by example with open standards and protocols. This is an opportunity to show the way in open standards inside the organization ISOC, a chance to practice what we preach. What that means is, are we deploying some of the key standards that we've helped promote in the IETF? So the outcomes of our work in 2020 will be to internally in our current networks, deploy 4 reference servers, develop easy to understand materials to support wider standards adoption inside our own organization, the company itself, the nonprofit, provide links to testing tools and further details on standards. So this is very important where we're helping document how we're implementing these standards and the further details that we're finding on how to implement those standards. So it's very important that we do this ourselves versus encouraging other people to implement standards that we're not implementing. I should say all of the projects internally are managed by ISOC staff. This has been part of the important change in the organization where we've shifted around some of the talent, made more mobility for the staff. So project leads are different staff members across the organization. For community networks, it's Max Stucci and Juan Pirano. For the Infracom Dev, it's Michuki Mwangi and Naveed Haq. For the Measuring the Internet, it is David Belson and Matt Ford. For the Time Security Project, it's Karen O'Donoghue. For the OC project here, the Leading by Example, it's Dan York. For the Internet Way of Working, it's Katie Watson Jordan and Carl Gonberg. And I hope not to forget, what are the other 3 projects? Can you go back, skip back a sec there? Manners is Aftab Siddiqui, and Encryption are Jeff and Ryan Polk inside our organization. So if you can skip back down to that last slide on time. And after that, next slide. Next slide. And that's it. So these projects are part of an ecosystem internally to support internet ecosystems, to build and create stronger infrastructure. If you'd like more information, we have more detailed slide decks that I can provide to Nermine and Hannah, and you can have those. We've also given updates with our team on Grow and Strong to the chapters, but if you need more specific webinars on things we're doing, just ask. We can easily accommodate that. So thank you very much, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. And my apologies if I was speaking too fast for the interpreters. I'm out of practice. I'm usually quite good. I've gotten much better. I used to speak much faster, so my apologies.
Thank you so much, Jane. Actually, it was perfect. And I think we can move, if there is no more questions for you, we can move to our experts and panelists to highlight in a very quick pitch for the different projects. So who would like to start? David, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, so my colleague Matt Ford and I are co-leads of the Measuring the Internet project. And as Jane mentioned, we will be working very closely with a number of external partners to gather information, to make use of their data and aggregate it and consolidate it into a single portal that at the outset will provide information on the adoption of enabling technologies. So things like the latest versions of TLS and HTTP and the ongoing tracking of IPv6 adoption. And then as well as internet shutdowns. So tracking when they occur, where they occur, what their cause was, what the impact was, both financially as well as from a human perspective. And then we will also, over time, be including information and perspectives on internet resilience, initially focused on the African region, but then ultimately expanding that globally, as well as metrics that will track the internet way of networking. So as Jane mentioned, that's one of the core projects. And what we want to do is find ways to measure basically how successful that is being applied across the world. As we talked about earlier as well, someone I believe had asked or mentioned IXP traffic. So that's an area of focus for me as well. I've been doing a lot of work over the last several months on internet resilience and looking at data from internet exchanges, connection speeds of the last mile, traffic to CDN providers, and so on. And so in looking at exchanges, a number of exchanges in the MENA region, across the United Arab Emirates, the Saudi Arabia IX, the Kuwait IX, and the Internet Exchange in Cairo, what we saw, from what I saw in the graphs that are available there, is that the increases in traffic starting pretty much coincident with the shutdowns in March, traffic grew, between 30 to 50%, depending on which exchange we're talking about. And definitely you can see that the peaks in the graphs. But one of the interesting things is that traffic really seems to, at least at a number of exchanges, appears to have largely settled back down, or at least the peak traffic rates has settled back down to the pre-shutdown levels. So I don't know if that's a function of school being out for the year. I don't know if that's a function of people having watched everything on YouTube and Netflix, or what the case may be. But there's definitely an interesting trend there. Also looking at connection speeds as measured and reported by the folks at Ookla who have speedtest.net. They have been publishing data that they update weekly, comparing fixed and mobile connection speeds over time as compared to a baseline in mid-December. And in looking at about 7 or 8 of the MENA countries, by and large, it's interesting to see that connection speeds have actually increased over the last 6 months overall. So there's been a very strong positive trend. Many of them did see a slight decline in mid-March, again, where more people were getting online and using the internet. But over the last 3 months, that has recovered. And by and large, there's been a really solid increase in connection speeds that Ookla has measured over the last 6 months, which is really great to see, and I think really reinforces the resilience of the internet architecture such as it is.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Any questions so far for Jane or for David before we move on to the next?
Yeah, we had a question in the Slido chat from Amr El Sadar. It was actually for Jane a little bit earlier on, but to be honest, I missed it. Sorry, Amr. I'm wondering if ISOC is looking at an uptake in domain name registrations, how these may be used to facilitate online commerce, working with the community.
That's a really, really good question. We are not, to the best of my knowledge, but we could definitely communicate with people that would have that data if it's of interest. So let's take that as a note. I'm sure that obviously I can maybe doing that, but it's obviously the the registries. I always have to do that in my head to make sure I get the right one. But we can definitely take a look, and we can work with Bahar, of course, from ICANN. So Nermine, maybe that's something we help the team with. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Okay. But it's a really good point about commerce, because so many, I don't know about in the Middle East, but many countries in Sub-Saharan are using Facebook for value chain purchasing. So for purchasing equipment and goods. So that might be an interesting thing too, to see how many people are spinning up groups to do that online. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Jane. And before leaving the measurement, Matt, do you like to have any reflection? Matt is with us, no?
Yeah, I'm here. No, I don't have anything to add. I think David covered it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. So we can move now to Max for the community network, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Max, and together with Juan Peirano, who is also on the call, but he's a bit shy, and I am the co-lead of the Community Networks project, which was mentioned by Michael during his presentation as one of the ways to bring connectivity in periods like this one, where we all need it desperately. And before I explain to you what exactly it is, there are examples of this across the world. In New York, where now the pandemic has been hitting really hard. We have New York City Mesh, which is an initiative that started a long time ago and has been connecting people also now when commercial ISPs couldn't, or commercial ISPs were struggling to keep up with the bandwidth needed for all the users. And what are they doing? What are these community networks? They are connecting people that, as Jane mentioned also during her presentation, wouldn't be connected otherwise, because in many cases this does not represent this would not bring any return of investment from the sides of a larger ISP or a larger initiative. So the local community, by means of what we call a local champion or a group of local champions, so people who decide to step up and do something for their community, they set up a little ISP to bring connectivity to their local area or region. As I mentioned, there are many cases around the world. We have New York City Mesh, which is one of the most known about right now, but there are examples pretty much all over the world. We have helped some in South America, in North America, in Europe as well, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific as well. So many of the colleagues you see on the call here from ISOC are also involved in the project. And one thing that I can say here is that we are also working for bringing some of these expertise that we have to the local region, to the Middle East, together with Nermine and Hannah. And you will hear about community networks more and more as we work with them to let people know that they exist, and maybe try to see if we can work with some either existing ones or new ones in the near future.
Thank you so much, Max. That is perfect. Any questions for Max, guys? Juan, do you have any reflection on community network from your perspective as well?
No, I think Max covered it all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a rather calm crowd today, but anyway, we shall move now to Naveed. Naveed?
Yeah, thanks, Nermine. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Naveed Haq, based in Pakistan, and I am co-leading the infrastructure and community development project with my colleague Michuki Mwangi. Michuki has taken his well-deserved break from today, so you will not see him. So I'm going to represent about the project. Jane has pretty much covered about our project. It's primarily supporting and developing communities That includes the network operator groups, the NRENs, and other people who are involved with the technical bit of the internet to support and build a local infrastructure. And under infrastructure, our prime objective is the internet exchange points. We help those communities who are interested to develop the internet exchange points. And with COVID-19, we have seen that the importance of IXPs have grown ever than before. What an IXP can do for you. So I'll just quickly give you an example. Imagine a post office posted near your city, and that is responsible to take your letters and deliver them inside your city or even inside your country. Imagine if that post office doesn't exist. Your letter was supposed to go outside the country and then come back, which will increase, one, the cost of getting those letters posted and delivered, and second, it will increase the time that you will receive those letters. So what IXP primarily does is that it increases the affordability bit of the internet and also increases the cost efficiency and the speed, I would say, of the delivery of the service. And with this COVID-19, we have seen the e-government services and other networks like financial networks moving into the IXP domain because they know the existence of IXP would eventually give a better experience to the users. In Middle East, I think there is a lot of opportunity. We see the submarine connectivity between the Middle East and North of Africa is quite patchy. And that's where the infrastructures like internet exchange points come into play. They can help to build a more resilient internet. We also work with MENOG, which is the Middle East Network Operator Group. This year, they were supposed to do their meeting in Bahrain, which has been cancelled. But this is also one of the key operator group working in Middle East and North of Africa region. I was also looking at some statistics. So UAE IX hit 180 GB. So what David said is pretty much what happened in Asia region as well. We have seen around 25% to 50% increase in traffic, which means that IXPs were helping to keep the internet running in their local countries. Nermine and Hannah, who are our key person in Middle East, this year we are working with some countries. Lately, there was some good development from Jordan. We have an IX in Egypt as well. We have an IX in Kuwait. But together with Nermine and Hannah, we look forward to support the technical community within the MENA region and see what we can do for a better and resilient internet infrastructure in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naveed. And we open the floor again for questions. And I think I have one for community network. Max, if you can take this from Sudan, our colleague Muhammad Al-Khair is asking, in the plenipotentiary of 2018, we have long discussions on community operators. Are we talking the same principle?
I think so, although I know Juan and Jane have maybe know better than I do about this because I wasn't there then. So I cannot answer directly, but I know that there were discussions around that time, so it might be possible.
Yeah, to add to what Max is saying, we're not opposed to that at all. And in fact, we've been hearing some calls for action in some countries to create more public backbones with open access so that more people can connect to those backbones. This is something we've heard in Latin America. I've seen some of that noted here. I'm not sure if that would happen in the US. The US is probably not the best example to use if you're talking about new development. We have a morass of rules and regulations. So I would say, yes, there are views on looking at more community operators that are not necessarily community networks, but nonprofit and profit hybrids. Actually, we've seen those in some countries and other. But as Max is indicating, we'd be happy to talk about anything with any of you that are clever ways to provide more connectivity in a more affordable and agile way. These community networks can actually get deployed very quickly. The technology is so good now that you don't have to spend months and months and months the infrastructure design. But Max and Juan are definitely the two to talk to brainstorm there.
Thank you so much, Rain. And if there is any other question before we conclude the session. So before I pass the mic to my colleague Howie to conclude, I would like to thank everyone on behalf of all the team and my colleagues over there. And I will be sharing the recorded video link for this session, as well as the presentations that were presented. And once the final report is launched on our website, of course, we'll be sharing as well the link. Meantime, if you have any comments or questions or whatever you think, please feel free to email it to me. I will type my email on the chat right now in case you don't have it. And please feel free, because we will be concluding the report in 2 weeks' time. Howie, if you take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Nermine. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Here at the Internet Society, we're always looking to improve the way that we do our events and the information that is that we're providing. So we've got 2 last little polls for you on Slido. So if you'd like to open up or click in the browser for Slido again, and this will not take long, just 2 more. So in one word, if you can tell us what you've liked about today's event. So far we've got nice together. I think we need to work, which is totally the case. We have lots of projects, lots of interesting projects. Interactive, excellent. Give it just 1 more minute, or 30 seconds even. Super. Well, I do hope you do like this tool. We're going to be using this at many of our events. We used ICOM last week, as well as ISOC ICANN. So yeah, have a look at it and get maybe download it on your phone. Or
Howie, do you make the word clouds available to everyone that was on the call? Could be kind of fun to see what they were.
Yeah, well, we get some analytics afterwards. So it'll be interesting. We can share a report afterwards and see what we have.
Okay, I really like this.
All right, that's great. We got to double figures. That was good. So we'll move on to the last and final question. Here we are. So let's see where we get out of a star system here. Hey, fantastic. Fair advice there. Nice. Well, that's good. That means we can only do better. Thank you very much. Not so bad. Superb. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. It's much appreciated. You chose to spend some of your morning, afternoon, or evening with us, and we do look forward to seeing you again at the next event. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all. Thank you.
Be well and safe, everyone.